Hello, everyone. My name is Frank Scatoni, and we are live for week 3 of Best Bet, the Del Mar Wagering Seminar, where I am joined by a special guest each week to discuss the best betting opportunities on Sunday's card. Just a reminder, this is not a selection show. We're not going race by race and giving out picks. Rather, we're going to tackle the card with wagering in mind and key on a few specific instances where we think there's good value and a chance to make a decent score. So as we are chatting, you can leave us comments or ask us some questions. And if we have time, we'll get to a few of them. So don't be shy. Post on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, wherever you're watching us live. If we have some time, we'll get to those questions and comments. All right, that's enough of me. Let's introduce today's guest. You may have last seen him crushing a few bets at Santa Anita, where he helped earn more than $11,000 for the horse racing charity Karma by donating $5,200 of his winnings to a very good cause for retired racehorses. Please welcome today's special guest, Chris Addo. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing well, Frank. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day at Del Mar. Like I said yesterday, Chamber of Commerce weather. You can't ask for a more perfect day here at Del Mar, and we should have a good card to dig into. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your involvement with the Karma charity and the wagering showcase you put on the last couple of weeks at Santa Anita to raise money for such a good cause.
Yeah, so what happened was that, George Ortuzar and Chappie, they selected a group of handicappers that will help them with the Karma, with raising money for retired racehorses that's associated with the Karma. And so they asked me to do it, and I said, sure, why not? And part of my strategy in regards to those 2 days I was betting was to identify races where I felt that there was a vulnerable favorite in each race, and then try to maximize my wagering opinion with the given dollars that we had. So I only had like about $300 to bet. So instead of me spreading my money throughout 3 races, I just said, you know what? I have my strongest opinion. I'm going to just go all in on this one Pacific course. And the one score that George and Chappie and a lot of people talk about was there was a start allowance race where I loved Shanghai Truffles. And this horse I felt was the absolute horse to beat. The favorite in that race was Lavender because she had come out a win where she had a very fast pace that set her up for her late kick. When she returned, there was not going to be a fast pace at all. So I just said, okay, this horse will get the perfect trip, save ground, and will not be the favorite. And so I structured all my bets just to see that, okay, if Shanghai Truffles win, we'll make the score. And so out of that race, we made about $3,200 off of $300 worth of bets.
Well, that's a familiar name because when we talk about some of the races later today, we'll see that Shanghai Truffles is entered today. And this is a horse who owes you nothing, but we'll see how that horse stacks up in the race later today when we get to that. Let's talk a little bit about your wagering and handicapping philosophy, because you mentioned some important things while you were talking about the Karma involvement. I know you put in the hours, you do the hard work when it comes to handicapping. So 2 things, what handicapping tools do you use? And is there a particular way that you approach the card?
Sure. So pretty much the first question is the handicapping tool. So 3 handicapping tools that I use. I use Formulator to actually import all my notes that I take, via the race replays, and then also a subscription service from Handicapper Support that I also subscribe for their trip notes. So I import their trip notes and my trip notes into DRF Formulator. The second part that I use is Timeform US, which provides excellent pace figures and a tool called the Pace Projector that will tell you if the pace is going to be fast or is going to be very slow. And then the third thing will be Handicapper's Report, which is focusing on trip notes for Southern California racing, as well as provide clock information. So to me, those are the 3 tools I use for handicapping. As far as my handicapping process goes, I look throughout the whole card. And so if I can identify maybe 1 or 2 races where I can feel that a favorite doesn't fit, either the pace scenario, the distance, or the surface. Then I'm going to dig deeper into that race and try to identify, okay, what horses fit today's conditions and that can beat that favorite. So it really depends upon, the conditions of the race, the pace, and also just, how strong I feel against that favorite for that, for that specific race.
So trip handicapping, pace handicapping, and looking to poke holes through favorites so you can find value. So let's talk a little bit about value. Finding that vulnerable favorite, looking to capitalize on it. I know that's your modus operandi. So what exactly are you looking for? Do you have specific angles that, in addition to poking holes into the favorite, what are you looking for when it comes to finding a price horse?
Yeah, so pretty much it's going for finding that price horse. It's just going to be finding horses in particular that are if there's a race for example, I'll give you a perfect example. Would just be the Breeders' Cup Sprint, last Saturday at Keeneland. The favorite in that race was coming off an absolute perfect trip, which was Diamond Oops, who rolled the rails perfectly, and I just put in my notes, perfect trip. Different circumstances come Breeders' Cup Sprint Day, and sure enough, that horse was going to be one of the favorites along with Yupon, who I was also against. And when I just said to myself, okay, you have two favorites you're going against. How is it that you're going to find that? How is it you're going to make money in that race? And sure enough, one of the fastest horses on speed figures was going to be Whitmore, who's actually trained by one of my friends, Ron Moquette, and then one of his assistant trainers. So I just said, well, Whitmore fits the profile perfectly of a horse coming out of fast races, fits the conditions of liking the track and the distance, and went off at 18-1. So you have to really go against the the public trend when they say oh, this favorite looks unbeatable, because it's when you go against the public, then you can find yourself making that nice score.
Yeah, there's nothing better than finding a perfect trip winner who comes back and is going to have a little bit of adversity in their next start. Everybody looks at that last race, thinks, hey, this horse can't lose today. Well, you know what? Horse like Whitmore, an old warrior, steps up, runs the race of his life, and wins the Breeders' Cup Sprint at, I don't know, what was he, 14-1 or something?
Yeah, 18-1. Yeah.
Nice. All right. So one more question before we actually get into the races you want to talk about. You found a race with a vulnerable favorite. You have a couple of price horses that interest you. How do you tackle the race? Are you a vertical player, a horizontal player? What kind of wagers do you gravitate toward?
So, the one thing I started doing when I started wagering seriously in college and then after college was tracking my bets. And the three wagers that I found the most simple wagers: the win bet, the daily double, and the exacta. Those are, if you keep the wagering simple and try not to go into like different horizontal bets like a pick 3 or a pick 4 or a pick 5, then you'll just make your life a lot easier, because wagering, there's so many different opportunities that there are out there in a wagering menu that if you keep things simple, then you'll find yourself saying, hey, I have more money that I cashed out. And if your opinion is right, then what you'll find is that, hey, I actually have more money in my pocket because I kept my wagers going just simple to the basics versus going outside of your comfort zone. Because, the one thing I learned, through the college was when I was working with Michael Kipnis, who was the wizard, he would always challenge me. He would be like, okay, why do you want to play a trifecta? Oh, because it pays a lot more money than exacta. So he would say, okay, why don't you, the money that you were investing in a trifecta, why don't you crush an exacta? So then that way you get more money back versus spending a $1 trifecta that can cost you 36. Why don't you pay a $18 exacta with one horse keyed on top over 2? That's $36 as well. So it's all about just keeping the wagers at a simple where you can maximize that one opinion for that specific race.
Right. Efficient and maximizing your opinion. A lot of people want to try and hit a huge score with a pick 5 or even a pick 6 and end up being right in 4 of the 5 legs and investing all that money and missing. Yeah. Whereas if maybe they had just played rolling doubles in that sequence, they might have been able to make a score. And that was one of the things that I really liked about your performance in the Karma charity fundraiser. Very targeted. And as our audience will see, you're going to be very targeted again today. So let's talk about today's races. I know you are looking at Races 7, 8, and 9, you like a pick 3, you like some doubles, and you like some win bets with some price horses. So why don't we turn to race 7? Going to dig right in. It's a $40,000 optional claimer, non-winners of 1, contested at 8 furlongs on the lawn with the rails at 18 feet today. We'll see what Chris thinks, but I analyze this race as it's the Del Mar website contest race, which I write up. I happen to think that the top 2 runners on the morning line are both vulnerable in here. The morning line favorite is number 6, Hermaphrodite. French import. She's 5-2 on the line. She's a 5-year-old mare making her first U.S. start for Sadler, coming off a 455-day layoff. It's a long time. She was running marathon distances in France. Is this just a prep for something longer, or is she the nuts in here?
You know what, Frank? I think this race is just a prep for running longer when they go to Santa Anita, because just looking at her form, her last 2 races where she's run second have been at a mile and a half and a mile and a quarter. Today's distance of 1 mile just seems way too short for me. So I agree with you where I'm going to take a stand against Hermaphrodite. And I'm also going to take a stand against the second favorite in this race, which is number 4, Velvet Queen, who has always shown the ability to show speed. However, this horse just never sticks around towards the end, as she is 0 for 4 over this Del Mar turf course. So I'm going to be looking a little bit outside the box in this race and try a first time turf horse going long, and number 5, Paid Informant. So Paid Informant, when you look at her form, she's never gone 2 turns on turf for the first time, but she's by a very good, respectable turf sire in Intermischief, the sire of last weekend's Breeders' Cup Classic, Authentic, who's actually a 14% turf sire. So that's very respectable rate. And then the dam of this horse, Eyes Wide Open, has produced 3 turf winners. So we know from a pedigree standpoint, this horse is bred to, to run well going long on the turf. But then also one thing about Paid Informant is that her running style really suits the pace of this race, because, based on time from US, the pace is expected to be slow. And Paid Informant has enough early speed where she can stalk her stablemate, number 4, Velvet Queen, and she comes running, with a good leg kick in the stretch, because she's actually run real evenly through the stretch in her last 2 starts. And those starts have been against very good horses. I mean, when she made her first race off the long layoff on August 16th, she went against Benny Duke, who won the grade 2 Senator Ken Matty at Santa Anita in her last start. And then when she finished third back on October 11th, she ran third behind Meredith, who came back to win an overnight stakes at Keeneland last Saturday. So with Richard Baltus, who actually won with a first-time wild horse yesterday, with a good pace in her, I think number 5, Paid Informant, is the top pick in this race.
Yeah, Paid Informant was also one of my top picks. I was looking at the same thing as you. I thought Velvet Queen would go out and set the pace. Maybe she could wire the field, but she hasn't really shown that necessary oomph to get the job done. Paid Informant's going to trip out, right? Just sit right behind the speed horse. And I thought she showed enough in her sprint races to suggest that going 2 turns on the turf would be perfectly fine. And you have the pedigree data to really back that up. 6-1 on the morning line. I think that's a really, really good price on that horse. I was also looking for someone else, because again, I didn't like the top 2 choices in the race, so I was looking for another price horse. I landed on number 2, On Mars, to come from off the pace. I think this is a steadily improving 3-year-old. She faces open company today. She's a Calbred, but I think she has a good late kick. But I know you're gravitating towards somebody else. You want to just talk about your second choice in the race real quick?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go back to, she brought me to the wedding, so I'm not gonna leave the wedding without, I'm not gonna leave the wedding without her. So I'm gonna go back to, I'm gonna use an exacta box, number 1, Shanghai Truffles. Yeah, she did have that perfect trip that I anticipate back on October 17th, but I also foresee that she'll get the same type of trip today, where under Drayden Van Dyke breaking from the rail, she'll be able to stalk both the 4, Velvet Queen, the 5, Paid Informant, on the saving ground around the first turn and going to the second turn in third. And if she has the trip and she's good enough, I think she could be right there at the wire. So my wagers in this race are, I'm gonna make a win bet on number 5, Paid Informant, and I'll make an exacta box 1 and 5.
Yeah, as you can see, I posted Chris's wagers for this week here. I'll also post them again on my Twitter account at Scatoni Shore Shot when we're done with the seminar, so you can access them there. Um, he likes the 1 and the 5 there. If you want to add another horse, you might want to throw in number 2 on Mars, because we both agree here that this is a race where you need to take on the top 2 choices. They could win, whatever, but at the prices they're likely to be, I think you really have to look elsewhere in race 7. Let's move on to race 8. It is the $100,000 Bob Hope. It's a grade 3, a 7-furlong main track affair for 2-year-olds. So would it really shock anyone if Bob Baffert had the morning line favorite in here? Of course not.
No.
That's number 2, Spielberg, your 6-5 morning line choice in the race, coming off a game maiden win when he emerged from the heavy Del Mar fog to edge out Parnelli. If you remember that race, that was crazy. We had a real heavy fog here. It was an epic stretch battle. Jock lost the whip. Spielberg still gutted out the victory. He now cuts back to 7 furlongs, should be fit off that 2-turn affair. I don't like that it took a Baffert runner 4 tries to break his maiden. I typically like to try to beat a horse like this, but I had a hard time coming up with a good alternative to Spielberg in this race. How do you see it, Chris?
Yeah, so Frank, I came with the same notion too when I first opened up the form and just like, okay, it's Spielberg. This horse has lost at 4 to 5, $1.10 to the dollar back in the American Pharoah. So my thing was, okay, I'm gonna try to beat Spielberg. But when I was trying to go through this race, when I looked at and trying to map out how the race is gonna set up, Spielberg looks like he'll get the absolute perfect pace pressing trip, because the only other speed in this race is the number 3 Weston, who also exited the Del Mar Futurity back on September 7th. But how I separated both the 2 and the 3 was that race on August 8th. So if you look at the race on August 8th, Spielberg was making his career debut. Weston was making his second start in the Best Pal. They were both at 6 furlongs. So if you look at the fractions of Weston, 22.78, 46.44, final time of 112.72. So that was in race 6. 4 races later, Spielberg ran a race where they went 22.27, 45.64, 110.49. And when I was looking at that, I just said, okay, Spielberg is the quicker of the 2 horses based upon, that one day where they were comparable at the same distance over the same surface. So that's why I decided where in this race, in my multi-race bets, I'm going to take a stand, single the favorite Spielberg, and so then that way I can look at other opponents both in the 7th and the 9th race. So for me, in my daily double and pick 3, I'm going to single number 2 Spielberg.
Okay, so yeah, if you see again, I posted on the screen here, in addition to the win bet on Paid Informant in race 7 in the Exacta box, we also want to start a pick 3 here. We'll talk about the last leg in a minute, but we're also going to start a daily double, 1-5 with 2. And you got 2 price horses going to the most likely winner of the Bob Hope. All right, so let's close out the late pick 3. It's the 9th race on the card.
Yep.
Very tricky maiden special weight for 2-year-old fillies going 5 furlongs on the lawn. Rails again at 18 feet. Got a bunch of first-time starters. We'll see if one of them can fire big right out of the gate. The morning line favorite is a second-time starter, and that's number 5, Evu, at 5-2. Just missed in her debut, lost by a neck to a horse who just crushed yesterday in the Desi Arnaz, a horse named Astute. Very, very impressive performance. Evu came from the clouds, from off the pace, smoked home her final quarter. It was a really, really good effort, but it came at 5.5 furlongs at Santa Anita, and that was too short for her. Now she's shortening up even more, another half furlong today, 5 furlongs. She can have the same problem, come flying from the clouds and not get there in time?
I don't think that she will even be hit the board in this race, Frank. I mean, when I looked at this horse's pedigree screams going long on turf.
Agreed.
She's by Big Blue she's by Big Blue Kitten, who is 0 for 11 with 2-year-old turf sprinters. Her damn Channel Lady won 5 of 11 starts, all rounding on turf, including 2 grade 3 wins. And while some people will say, well, she came out of the clouds. Well, there's no guarantee that she's going to be able to do that in her second start. So, do you really want to take a short price on a horse trying to weave their way through traffic and trying to get up at a distance that's too short based on her pedigree? No. So I'm gonna try to beat Evil entirely. I'm gonna go. That race of Astute, it was a very good race because it actually earned an above par buyer speed figure. So the one thing you can look at, as a handicapping angle is if you look at your daily racing form, you'll see that they'll list the buyer par here as 64. And so the one thing you see right away with Evil, that race earned 69. So that was an above average maiden race. So what I like to do is look at second time stars coming out of those fast maiden races, because when they come back, they can be sometimes overlooked in the wagering. And so I've identified one horse in that, coming out of that same maiden race. Number 9, Philly Licious. So when you look at this form, it just ran 5th around the racetrack, just split the field at 9-1. But when I looked at that race, it appeared that Edwin Maldonado was not very serious at all in that race. She had a good, she was covered up behind horses, stayed on the route throughout, angled out, and was just gingerly handled through the stretch, as if they were just giving that horse just to give them an educational run. Today, this horse makes his second career start, and the one thing I looked at formulator was how does Richard Baltus do with second-time starters, in turf sprint? In the past year, he's had 5 starters, 2 wins, including Gator Shining on November 13th with today's rider, Ricky Gonzalez. So that's a positive thing. Another factor is the pedigree. She's by Munnings, who's a terrific turf sprint sire. He's a 20% turf sprint sire. And the dam of this horse has produced a turf winner in Temperance, and also a horse trained by Richard Baltus called Tayshawn, who was second in the American Turf Cup on Kentucky Derby Day. So, she's 12-1 on the morning line with a good pedigree, with a trainer as well with second-time starters. So my win bet's going to be number 9, Philly Licious. But I'm also going to use her in exacta box for number 10, Magical Thought, who comes out that same fast race. And then the hype horse, the American Pharaoh baby, number 2, Velvet, who's been working gangbusters in the mornings for our trainer, Richard Mandela.
Yeah, let's go back to your top pick for a second, number 9, Philly Licious, because I also want to point out, I would not be surprised if this horse showed more speed today. They legged up Maldonado in the first start, which made me think that they wanted this horse to make the lead, and had a little trouble, steadied early, and then he just wrapped up and ran around the track. Ricky Gonzalez is a very, very aggressive jockey. He will get this horse out of the gate and put this horse in the race. So I think Philly Licious has a really good chance to run big today. I like your other selections as well, but I would just like to throw out number 6, Freedom Flyer, 4-1 on the morning line. One of my favorite angles as a handicapper, horses who show sharp speed, get tired, and are now cutting back a little bit. This horse last time, 5.5 furlongs, set a really, really fast pace in that race. Weekend, got overtaken, but still finished 3rd. I expect that horse to improve really, really leaps and bounds today. Also has a race over the course where she ran much better than looked in her debut. She bumped at the brakes, she bobbled, she steadied, she had a ton of trouble. Pratt rode her that day, so that tells me that the connections must have thought highly of her for him to take a ride on a first-time starter in a turf sprint. So I would also look to throw in number 6, Freedom Flyer in there. But here, if you look on the screen, we've got Chris's race 9 win bet on number 9, Philly Licious, and an exacta box with the 2 and the 9, and an exacta box with the 9 and the 10. And let me go back to where we were before with his pick 3. Hey, Chris, if Baltus has a big day, you're going to have a big day. Right? Peyton Foreman in the first leg and Philly Licious in the last leg. 2 Baltus horses.
One of the things that people know me about was that I like to ride on hot trainers. So when this is just on a side, was that yesterday when Astute won, I was like, wow, she's 5-1 and she's a beautiful daughter of Speightstown going against the Baffert. I'm like, well, if Mandela's hot, that's where I'm going to. It's because the one thing I learned, in this game is just that trainers are real streaky. So their horses feel the same way too. If their horses are real hot and then they're running well, then you know what? That's what you want to do. And it's like Leo said, if you can identify those trainers early, then
Yep.
you have the heads up on the rest of the competition.
That's right. Try and get in on the streak before everybody else starts to know what's going on. That's when you really start to find value. Well, I want to thank you today, Chris. I told everyone I'll post your picks on Twitter so we can follow throughout the day. I'll also archive this video on Twitter so people can watch. I really appreciate your taking the time to join us. As I like to say, good luck to us and let's make some money. See everybody next week. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Frank.
All right. Bye.